I was born in a little town called Mineola, Texas, March 20th, 1934.
You shared the
8 o'clock in the evening.
8 o'clock in the evening,
Yes.
all right. What are your parents' full names?
My mother's name was Minnie Collins, ultimately Boyd. She married a fellow named Boyd, B-O-I-D, and Collins being the maiden name. And my father's name was Willie Lewis Brown, Sr.
What were their respective educational levels?
My mother finished the 10th grade. I don't think my dad ever even got to the 10th grade. My mother was, of course, a maid all of her life, and my dad worked on the railroad and in roadhouses as a waiter.
I see, okay. Were you raised by both parents or one parent or by someone else?
I was raised by neither of my parents. I've never had an occasion to sleep under the same roof with my father. My mother lived in what they called service in Dallas or in one of the other cities surrounding Mineola. And that is, you live in service, you live in the maid's quarters over the garage, or you live someplace on the property where you work. And that's where my mother lived. My grandmother was the person who raised me.
And what was your grandmother's name?
My grandmother's name was Anna Lee Collins. She was the Collins, and it was her house in Mineola. And my mother was her only daughter, and she had 4 sons, all of whom were of assistance to her raising her daughter. Her daughter was the youngest. My mother was the youngest, and all of my mother's children were raised by her mother, not by her. None of us were ever raised by her.
Will you describe your grandmother?
My grandmother was a woman who, a very strong woman. She never had a job in her whole life. She was a bootlegger. She ran a roadhouse, or honky-tonk, as we called it in Mineola, with her sons. What she did before I was conscious of what was happening, I cannot tell you, because she never discussed anything about herself. She never discussed any of her history. She never discussed whom she may have been married to. She discussed none of the above. I only knew her in the way in which I know her, and that is that she was the grandmother who was there 24 hours a day, who issued all of the orders, who showed absolutely no mercy on any failure to respond. There was no democracy in her. Everything about her was dictatorial, and she exercised an iron fist, but she provided an incredible amount of love and warmth and assistance, first and foremost, to all these 5 children she had the responsibility to raise. She had no education on her own, but she was absolutely convinced that education, even if she had to beat it into you, was the salvation. She was not a church person, unlike her daughter, who could have very easily been a preacher.
Your mother?
Grandmother, yes, my mother, Minnie. My grandmother never went to church, but I had to go to church every Sunday. I had to go to Sunday school. I had to try to qualify for the choir. If I didn't make the choir, I had to be in the usher board. I had to do something with the church full time, as my grandmother continued her wayward ways, being whatever she was, period. She was a mean woman as well, and in the sense of protecting her herd. You got in a fist fight with some other kid and you lost that fist fight, you got a whipping. And then she went and found that kid.
But you got a whipping first.
Yes.
Yes, I see.
So she was really just an ideal person. Now, on the other hand, my mother, whom I said did not directly raise us because she really didn't live with us, she came home every week. She came back from wherever she was. She would bring stuff with her. She would bring clothing that were being disposed of by the family she worked for that may or may not fit any of us, she would always bring a ton of food. The enhancement of the foods available for us to eat, other than what we would grow and what my grandmother was able to get from wherever she got it, including whatever her sons had sent her, my mother supplemented with food she brought in from the white folks' house, as she called it. And at the time she was there, she had such a great sense of humor. We learned so much from her in those very brief 2-day visits or so, including her incredible commitment to church.